I mean, I don't know if you're present for the whole like drug report thing.
Stop filming, bro.
Stop filming shit.
I can film whatever you want. Get out of here, bro. Get out of my face. Yo, fuck you, what the fuck is that? What the fuck?
The video you just saw is of a CBS camera person filming a protest, and someone comes up to him. It sounds like a couple people, and they're saying stop filming, and then they start hitting him. They bashed him over the head, and he had to go to the hospital and get several stitches. This is part of the problem, right? Do you think we're going to see the media start reporting on this low-level street violence directed at random individuals, bystanders, and journalists? No, probably not. But things like this have been going on for a very, very long time. Now, for a while, this kind of violence, the stop filming, was targeting journalists and the police, people that were part of the establishment. Back in 2012, at the No NATO protests, many of these protesters, activists, whatever you want to call them, linked arms and then yelled, "Charge the press." What did that guy with the camera do to deserve getting hit over the head and sent to the hospital? Nothing. Just filming a public display of political statements. That's it. These people who are violent are the bad guys. So you know what? I'm sick and tired of saying that there aren't two sides. Like, I'm not on anyone's side, right? There are two sides here. There's the violent and the non-violent. And what's happening now is that we don't hear about these incidents like Eric Clanton bashing someone over the head with a bike lock. We don't hear about this stuff in Richmond where a camera guy gets bashed over the head. Only if you're within that little small group that has direct access to that information. So yes, the Bay Area news organizations did report on Eric Clanton. Yes, CBS 6 is reporting on this guy getting hit over the head. There's no national conversation about it. None of the New York-based digital writers are talking about it, but they'll certainly talk about someone getting pepper sprayed if they're on the left. So once again, I'm here to talk about the escalation of violence, because this has just dominated the conversation, and it is a nightmare that it's just going to get worse. But I was thinking about it. I'm looking at some of the tweets from me that are out of context. Take, for instance, Al Jazeera calling me a white supremacist for some goddamn reason. They made a video where they're talking about white supremacists not taking responsibility for the street battles. The tweet they showed from me has nothing to do with the street battles. The tweet from me is specifically about racism and terrorism, and how we shouldn't blame all white people for this one guy, just like we shouldn't blame all Muslims for these terrorists. Doesn't matter, because Al Jazeera doesn't care, right? So they're going to put out bad information. Then you've got some other high-profile Twitter individuals who take tweets out of context, or for that matter, can't understand the context, because it's 140 characters and they're not following everything, they're seeing a retweet. And then they quote that tweet and they use it to fuel the flames of their tribe, to get people to rile up and join their faction. There's this video by CGP Grey I tweeted out the other day that talks about idea germs and how ideas spread amongst each other. And he makes some really interesting points. This video is actually a couple years old. These ideas of the right and the left, they are not at odds with each other. They complement each other. They help each other grow. And the sad reality is, the people on the left and the right aren't arguing with each other. They're arguing amongst themselves about the other group. And what happens then is they rile themselves up without actually knowing anything else about the other person, and then they go out and get into street battles. They go out and get into street fights. And it escalates to the point where we get a guy who shows up to a baseball game with a rifle and shoots some politicians, and it escalates with a guy getting in his car and ramming a group of protesters. So I talked a bit the other day about how the left doesn't seem to understand that the alt-right and the new right or Trump supporters are not the same thing. There have been several journalists who have tweeted things out about the alt-right. Oh, you know, all of Trump supporters are alt-right. And I have to repeatedly say, no, hold on, chill. I have progressive friends who I'm talking to yesterday saying, well, I mean, you know, all of Trump supporters are alt-right. No. You realize that the alt-right is a small group of people. Yes, they're very vocal, and certainly many of them are Trump supporters. There is absolutely an overlap. But no, right? The average Trump supporter is pro-Israel and doesn't like racism. They're just run-of-the-mill Americans. So I started asking myself, why is this? Why do people not know this? And it's because people on the left aren't following people on the right. And many people on the right aren't following people on the left. Certainly there are people on the left who do, and certainly there are people on the right who do. But when I look at a post from, say, Paul Joseph Watson, and he calls the alt-right right-wing SJWs, I'm like, yeah, Paul certainly doesn't like the alt-right. Or when Cernovich goes on a tirade months ago about the alt-right and White Spencer and how he is not okay with this racism. You know, no matter how many times he says this, no matter how many times someone like Cassandra Fairbanks says, I do not agree with this and I am not for this, and in fact Cassandra is Puerto Rican, you still get people calling her a white supremacist. It's all about tribalism. And this is exactly why Dave Rubin has been called alt-right. It's why I've been called a white supremacist and alt-right. It's why people like Chris Reagan and Sargon of Akkad are called alt-right or white supremacists. Because if you are not a part of their tribe, you clearly are conservative. I actually had a journalist message me the other day saying, your sentiments are clear, you lean right. Right? I don't agree with basically any right-wing positions. So how does that make me right? Oh, it's not about whether or not you actually are right-wing. It's about if you do not align with them, you clearly must be the other. Over the past several years, 10 years, whatever, the left and the right has been veering further and further away from each other. And now we're entering the point where it's almost impossible to stitch this wound back together, to bring people back together. Because the people on the left, most of them don't agree with free speech. Oh, hold on, they say they agree with free speech, but there's limits because they don't agree with hate speech. And there's a lot of influence coming from Europe, where they don't have free speech. They claim to have free speech, but compared to the United States, they don't. You can actually be arrested for making jokes. Many countries will arrest you for making a joke. You can be criminally charged. In fact, certain political beliefs in Europe are completely illegal. In the US, you can say whatever you want. You can believe whatever you want. But there's a group of people that no longer agree with that. And there's a group of people that do agree with that. And both sides have violent psychopaths. So here's the way I see it. People on the left, they don't follow personalities on the right. They don't follow people like Mike Cernovich or Paul Joseph Watson or Cassandra Fairbanks. They might see tweets from them every so often, retweets, because someone they follow might retweet something they said, to only see the worst of what this person is doing, or at least to see what they could disagree with the most. And then they say, I certainly know everything about this person. And the right does a lot of the same too. They focus specifically on the worst tweets, the most egregious offenses of the SJWs, of feminism, of the far left. When someone on the far left looks over, finally, say the Boston Free Speech rally, someone up there on that hill, they look over and they see this crowd of people waving Nazi flags, right? Not really Nazi flags, but it's the Nazi imagery. It's like the Keck flag. They see Confederate flags, and they see a bunch of guys with guns. They go, that is exactly what everyone told me it was. These people all must be Nazis. And then the people on the right look over at that hill, and right in the front line, what do they see? People all black with masks on holding clubs and bats, and they say, wow, that side has a whole bunch of crazy wingnuts. But the reality is, there was one Confederate flag at the Boston rally, and the people there said, well, we don't like it, but they're allowed to have it. And then over on the other side with Antifa, the organizer says, well, you know, they're here for our security. I don't want to denounce them and tell them to go away. So what happens is you've got a bunch of regular people standing about in the crowd. And there's a few people who stand out of the crowd. And that's all anyone can see. The most baffling thing to me is that last night I did a live stream. And in my live stream I talked about terrorism and not branding the entire group of people based on the actions of an individual. I talked about institutional racism and how it's real. And actually, I've got a ton of videos where I repeatedly say, look at my documentaries about refugees and institutional racism. In fact, my coverage from Sweden, one of the most viewed videos from there was my trip into Malmö, where I talk with the deputy mayor, we walk around this dangerous neighborhood, and nothing happens. But it doesn't matter. Why? Because people don't watch the video. These people on the left don't watch the video. They see someone take a screen grab and then share it saying, Tim is supporting Nazi rhetoric. And they see that title inside the no-go zone and they go, wow, it must be true. And they start tweeting at me talking about how I need to focus more on racism. A woman tweeted at me yesterday saying, maybe you should stop defending Nazis and start talking more about racism, of which I have never defended Nazis, and I talk about racism kind of a lot. But you know what the reality is? No one is looking at the other's content. I read It's Going Down, and sometimes I read The Daily Stormer, and I think they're both absolutely nuts. Someone has to back down. And I've spoken with some people I know on the right. They want to go to Boston, they want to go to this rally. And I said, you know what? I'll probably get a lot of flack for this, but don't do it. Cancel. Don't show up. They tell me, yes, but then the left wins. And I'm like, wins what? Who cares? All that's going to happen if this rally takes place is more violence. It doesn't mean you're right or wrong. It just means someone has to take responsibility for de-escalation. And that means sometimes if you want to win the war, you have to retreat. But constantly going out and confronting rival groups and starting fights, that's going to end up with people getting hurt, which it already has, and it's going to end up with an escalation of violence. It's going to cause more damage to free speech. It's going to cause more damage to our country. It's going to split the divide even further. So whether you're on the left or the right, you know what you need to do? You need to say, back the fuck away. Go chill out, watch Game of Thrones, enjoy the day, have a nice drink, and let things calm down. Do not let zealotry of the left or the right push you away from other human beings. If there is someone you think is wrong and detestable, you need to go and sit down with them. You need to talk to them. Because this is what calms everyone down when you actually humanize an individual. It's so easy to be violent when the other group of people are the evil monsters. But what happens when you actually go out for dinner with most of these people? You realize that they care about almost the exact same things as you. You realize that we all bleed red, that we all want basically the same thing, to live a happy life, to protect ourselves and our families, to have food, to have shelter, clean drinking water. And although you might disagree with the politics of a particular group, the only way to get people to move over, to move to the middle, to maybe even agree with you or support you, is to reach out a hand and say, sit down with me, let's talk about it and figure out where we can make changes that will make things right. It doesn't matter how extreme or vile someone is. You need to help pull people from the extreme sides. This is a responsibility of everybody. If someone doesn't take responsibility and concede and say, you know what, take it. We're going to let things de-escalate, maybe come back later. If all we do is want to win, we have to beat the left, we have to beat the right, then what's going to end up happening is more violence, which is going to be used by either side to justify more violence. We're going to have more people hurt. It's going to drag in innocent bystanders. It's going to make the problem worse. And the thing that scares me the most is that I think these people actually want this. They want to recruit for their ideologies. They don't want a revolution. They want a civil war. They want to hurt other people. And they're dragging in the average person into their fight through divisive rhetoric and fighting. So you know what? Why the hell would I want to be on any one of your sides when you advocate violence? Certainly I know there are people amongst the left and the right who don't advocate violence, but as long as there are factions that are not being shut down and opposed by the nonviolent, there really are only two sides, the violent and the nonviolent. And I'm going to stick to the side of the people who want life to pretty much be awesome and suck less. So if you're one of those people that thinks you can go out and get violent to fight for whatever the hell you want because your way of life is better, because they started it, you think it's their fault, you make life suck. And with that, I'm going to go take care of some of my apartment nonsense. And hopefully, once I get that all done, I can set up the podcast, I can actually get back out on the ground. I'll be covering the solar eclipse on the 21st, and I will likely be at one of these protests on the 19th. I'm not sure which one. It's currently very difficult for me to leave New York because of having to move, so I don't know if I'll be going to any of these particular locations, but there are protests scheduled for New York, so maybe I'll be there. But let me know what you think. Comment below. We'll keep the conversation going. You can yell at me, you can agree with me, whatever. I just don't care. As long as we're not getting violent anymore, say whatever the hell you want. And if you like the video, click the like button. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Timcast. And if you want to support the work that I do, make sure you go to timcast.com/donate. You can subscribe for monthly donations. You can donate Bitcoin. All of it helps me continue doing the work that I do, and it's greatly appreciated. With that, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow at 4.